We watch a lot of YouTube. And by we, what I really mean is he, my son JJ. I'm not a fan of YouTube. Yes, it's a wealth of resources. It can be helpful, but oftentimes it aggravates me. I understand that YouTube is designed to keep feeding the viewer more and more of the thing they like and thereby keep them watching longer. And this is precisely the aspect of YouTube I find most annoying. If I tune in to a specific video or familiarize myself with a song, great. I don't want 5 more like it. I want it to start and then stop so I can go back to what I was doing. I don't want to spiral down a rabbit hole. Clearly, most people don't feel this way. And against my best intention, there's times that I get sucked into what JJ's watching. I've seen too many videos about rockets and space, intricate multi-day recipes, and the Business Insider channel where I've learned that about 12,000 individual parts and 1-year production time make a Pagini accordion, and a 2 to 3 year design process for Japanese iron kettles, the 300 pounds of acoustic insulation installed in each bespoke Rolls-Royce, and the 12 meters of fabric needed for every hand-designed kimono. This is also how I learned that it takes Haworth of London 5 years to make a professional quality oboe. Yes, an oboe. Evidently, it's one of the most complicated instruments to make because they're prone to cracking. Crafted out of African blackwood that grows wild in Tanzania, this endangered tree can only be harvested by permit after it's 60 years old. It's the heart of the log that becomes the basis of the oboe. And the same properties that make blackwood ideal for oboes is what also makes it so difficult to work with. The lengthy process begins with shaping the wood with metalworking equipment. The process takes place over a number of years. You might wonder, as I did, what takes so long? Between each round of shaping, the wood is stored for at least a year, allowing the wood to rest, going from hot to cold, from dry to damp, over and over and over again. It is this process of expansion and contraction that helps to ensure the oboe will not crack. Once the shaping is done, the complex mechanical key work begins. Workers file and shape the keys all by hand. It can take up to 60 hours alone to fit the keys to the oboe's body. The complexity of the key work determines the instrument's price, and a professional oboe has as many as 45 keys. Finishing the oboe is the last and most important part of creating the instrument, and the fine-tuning can take up to 3 days. In those final days, the oboe maker meticulously fits cork pad under the keys with painstaking precision. A single air leak renders the oboe useless, so the craftsman works tirelessly to ensure a tight seal. If an oboe has a single imperfection, it cannot be sold for top dollar. Fixing a single key can bend another key. It is an intricate process of adjust, test, adjust, and test until it's just right. I found this process fascinating. I marvel at all the details of this kind of thing, the patience that it demands. I considered what must it be like to be an oboe maker? I imagine you get that new log of African blackwood and you're excited, and then when you're done, 5 years later, the sense of accomplishment must be profound. But 5 years? There's so much in the middle. So many steps, so much monotony, so much that can go wrong, so much that likely does go wrong. And when making an oboe, it is the in-between that determines if the oboe will crack or if it will become an oboe. The in-between is the most important part. There's something nebulous and difficult about the in-between, something unsettling and vulnerable about the middle. It's not the beginning, it's not the end, it's somewhere not so easily identifiable between the poles of starting and stopping, new and old. Like with the oboe, it seems that in life, the in-between is the most important part, because the in-between is all about becoming. Consider for a moment the term middle-aged. When Rabbi Hayon made very clear last night that at 50 he is indeed middle-aged, I am not sure whether my tender, youthful 47 is officially middle-aged. Middle-aged is often defined by what is not. No longer young, not yet old. All we know is that it is somewhere in the middle. Some would say 40 to 60, others 35 to 55, some 45 to 65. It really depends on who you ask. And nobody can say decisively what it is. And what about midlife in general? We've all heard of the dreaded midlife crisis. Decidedly a negative thing. I mean, if not only because the word crisis is never welcome. A midlife crisis typically connotes uncharacteristic behavior or a negative event that occurs about the time of one's midpoint in life. Psychoanalyst Elliot Jacques coined the term midlife crisis in the 1960s after observing a decline in life satisfaction and happiness as individuals reached midlife. Common belief about this stage of life is that you should expect to face inner turmoil about your identity, life choices, and mortality. That does not sound good. The idea of the in-between and the struggle is not unique, though, to a certain time in our life. This experience occurs at all ages and stages, and it seems to be that there is an inherent challenge that we don't just swing from high point to high point or even from high to low. We really live and exist predominantly in the middle, in long, vast time intervals and emotional plateaus and stages. We find ourselves in the in-between. It's as if we're players in the child's game Monkey in the Middle, shuttling back and forth to and from one side to the other in efforts to capture the ball with the perceived goal of getting out of the middle, to reach the achieved next golden ring, the job, the promotion, the success in love and family, the next vacation or simcha. But life is made up mostly of the in-between. The regular moments are the essence of our life, the meat and substance of our days. Consider the Torah and our ancestors' experience of wandering in the desert, framed by the excitement and drama of the exodus from Egypt and the long-awaited anticipation of entering the promised land. The whole wandering in the desert is the in-between. The wandering is heavy, hot, long, monotonous, quarrelsome, and it is where the Israelites figure out what it means to become a people, receive the Torah, and bring God into their midst when they build the tabernacle. All the experience of the wandering, this in-between place, is exactly how our ancestors learned to live a life aligned with Torah. All the jokes about Jews wandering because nobody stopped to ask for directions, it's the in-between. While not intended as a destination, it's an essential piece, a time for growth and development, of shaping and preparation, and an experience that could not have been rushed. More than any single moment or achievement in life, this middle place often defines us better than the highs or lows. We're dressed up and put together for all the highlights. We show well. Conversely, when we're having a hard time, when we're sick or suffering a loss, we may fall apart. But the in-between, we are who we are, and we look how we look. This is the place that we're in most often, just chugging along. And we often are in this middle, navigating solo. If we're fortunate, people rush to be with us for the highs and lows, and we share our days with our family. But the in-between is often the part of our journey we spend the most time alone. The in-between is the regular, usual stuff of life, sometimes what we call the daily grind. While not glitzy or fancy, celebrated or adorned, it is quite possible that these moments are the most ripe for spiritual connectedness to God, to others, and even for self-realization and recognition. What's important to us often blooms in the in-between if we let it. A new hobby or passion, new relationships, new self-awareness, a new way of being, slowly, quietly, bit by bit, unannounced and unapparent, growing. Abraham's covenantal moment happens literally in between the physical pieces of the sacrifices. In Hebrew, we call it Brit Ben HaBetarim, the most sacred, most holy, most important moment of connection between God and the man who becomes the first Jew occurs be'emtza, in the middle. In Genesis chapter 15, Abram asks God how he will know that he is to possess the land. Text says, God replies to him saying, bring me a 3-year-old heifer, a 3-year-old she-goat, a 3-year-old ram, a turtle dove, and a young bird. And he brought all these and cut them into 2, placing each half opposite the other. And as the sun was about to set, a deep sleep fell upon Abram, and a great dark dread descended upon him. There appeared a smoking oven and a flaming torch, which passed between the pieces. On that day, Adonai made a covenant with Abram. It was in the darkness, in his sleep, with dread upon him, and there was light in the middle of the pieces and the covenant, the eternal promised Abram. And to this day, we have that relationship with God. It could not have been a moment, or it could have been a moment of huge fanfare, a parade, a mighty celebration, but no, it was in that dark place, in the quiet and the solitude with a sense of looming dread. That's sometimes the in-between. The in-between are places of important transition and often places of vulnerability. The psalmist writes, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Valleys are middle places. In this case, a hard and scary middle place, a place of anticipatory loss, a place where we need protection and at the same time ready ourselves, a place where we can still feel God's presence and comfort. Most of life is in the middle. We find ourselves smack dab in between high moments that we're aiming for, goals of school, career, family, and low moments, times of struggle, hardship, disillusionment, and loss. Consider for a moment the brilliance of our tradition and how we shine light and elevate the in-between moment, specifically bar and bat mitzvah. Among the most challenging times of in-between are the teenage years. As teens are not newborn or young children, they are also not yet adults. It's a time when life feels awkward and unsettling. For most 13-year-olds, bar and bat mitzvah happens in the ultimate of the in-between, the middle of middle school. It is often a time of teen angst and deep uncertainty. It is precisely at this point when we catapult what is in between and give it the spotlight. We illuminate what our students can do and guide them to become leaders of prayer and teachers of Torah. We empower them to take on new roles and develop new skills. We push them to see themselves as who they are becoming, where they're headed, while acknowledging that they're not done growing, not yet. While too often the in-between is dismissed, we elevate this important time of physical, emotional, and spiritual becoming. In the summer after graduating from college, Sulika Juad had fallen in love and moved to Paris to pursue her dream of becoming a war correspondent. A few weeks shy of her 23rd birthday, she was diagnosed with leukemia and given a 35% chance of survival. Her powerful memoir, Between Two Kingdoms, tells her story from diagnosis to recovery to reentry into life, and depicts how she began writing the acclaimed New York Times column and video series, Life Interrupted, from her hospital bed. Sulika finds herself in the in-between when, after 3.5 years of chemo, a clinical trial, and a bone marrow transplant, she's medically cured but far from healed. The memoir gets its title from Susan Sontag's book, Illness as a Metaphor, where she writes, everyone who is born holds dual citizenship in the kingdom of the well and in the kingdom of the sick. Although we prefer to use only the good passport, sooner or later each of us is obliged, at least for a spell, to identify ourselves as citizens of the other place. In a twist of irony, Sulika experiences an existential crisis not when she's battling cancer or on the brink of death, but rather when she finds herself medically cured in between her physical recovery and her ability to really begin living again. To push herself back into life, Sulika embarks on a 100-day, 15,000-mile road trip across the country to meet some of the people who had written to her during her years in the hospital. What she learned on this trip is that the divide between sick and well is porous, that the vast majority of us will travel back and forth between these realms throughout our lives, and that much of life is in the in-between. She writes, "Over the last few weeks, I've put so much pressure on myself to be either fully in or fully out. I've been so caught up in assessing the risks and armoring myself against them that it hasn't occurred to me that there is a third way. To let things grow and change and evolve, to uncover who we are and what we want along the way, to live in that middle terrain." These are familiar gleanings to us, especially on this day of Yom Kippur. Today's Torah portion puts before us blessing and curse, life or death, and we are told, "Uvacharta chayim," choose life. Choosing life means being part of life fully, in the good, the bad, the fun, the difficult, the light and the darkness, and the in-between. Cindy Lamoth reminds us of this in her article entitled "Life Happens in the In-Between," saying, in the highlight reel of your life, you'll remember your big career successes with pride, but you'll also cherish the uneventful days where you bonded with a coworker or learned something new. Or the moments where you tended your creative vision and watched it unfurl before your eyes in the smaller details of a project. Brené Brown makes the case for learning to love the ordinary. She says, "Don't be so busy chasing extraordinary that you miss the ordinary." Brown advises taking a moment to commit to how we feel in ordinary moments can be very powerful. The ordinary is the in-between. This matters because most of life is spent in the in-between. It is the substance of our lives. It is the connective tissue, the air we breathe. All too often we pass over the in-between without thought or reflection. As we're busy on our way towards the highlights, we take the in-between for granted. If we want to live a life that feels whole and full, meaningful and peaceful, then we must be willing to find all of these things in the in-between. Recognizing the blessings of the in-between amidst the challenges and what can feel mundane and ordinary and even boring is the key to an enriched life. It is not to take more trips, have more fancy occasions, acquire more wealth or toys. It is just to be. And when we're able to be present in the in-between, we gain a better appreciation that all moments matter. All moments have value. And sometimes, without any particular reason, we find that right in the middle of the ordinary, beckoning to us from the in-between, is simple joy. I close with this poem by Donna Ashworth. Joy does not arrive with a fanfare on a red carpet strewn with flowers of a perfect life. Joy sneaks in as you pour a cup of coffee, watching the sun hit your favorite tree just right. And you usher joy away because you're not ready for it. Your house is not as it must be for such a distinguished guest. But joy cares nothing for your messy home or your bank balance or your waistline, you see. Joy is just supposed to slither through the cracks of your imperfect life. That's how joy works. You cannot invite her. You can only be ready when she appears. And hug her with meaning, because in this very moment, joy chose you. Eloheinu v'Elohei avotenu v'imotenu, our God, God of our mothers and our fathers, on this day of atonement, help us to feel your nearness. Welcome us through the gates of forgiveness and be with us always. Help us to be more aware of the many blessings that surround us, to allow joy and fulfillment and peace to choose us, especially in the in-between.